welcome back to the Cinema Condition with your host, filmmaker, and creator of the Nerdcore Podcast Network, Raul Alejandro Mendoza. But as always, I prefer you guys call me the Nerdy Chicano. And here we are again with another film and another guest. And today we get to look at 1988's Grave of the Fireflies with a returning guest, and that is none other than young Yoda himself, Brad.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Raul. Thank you guys for having me again.
Yup. Let's not act like we didn't just see each other a while ago while we were doing the live show.
I know. I'm trying. Like I said, I'm trying to put on a serious face, which is really hard after we record the live show, based on how much alcohol I consume.
Yeah. But I'm glad that the alcohol you've been consuming is low before this show. But,
I mean, it's fair to Midland, but I'm doing my best.
Yeah, I respect that. So, Brad's coming back. The last time you saw him, you heard him, was for Ikiru, for Akira Kurosawa's Ikiru. Great episode. Loved having him on. But I promised him 3 spots on this show, on the first season. And, he chose, what's it called? He chose this one next. And then the next one we're doing is the farewell. But that will be the last time you hear from Brad. But you got one more time before you hear him before the season ends. And at the end of the episode, I'm going to announce to you all who will be the next guest. And it's a very, very special guest, and I can't wait to say who we've got coming on next week on the Cinema Condition. But yeah, I want to thank you all so much for the listens and just overall. Some of y'all have actually been going to the podcast feed and rating and reviewing that. So I really want to thank you all for that. It really does mean a lot to me. But I also want to just, highlight a couple of things. You all been enjoying the episodes on YouTube. It's a lot. Gaspar Noé's Love has 1,500 something already views. So
that's impressive.
It's impressive. I know why it has those numbers, but
Oh, we know why too, and anybody who listens to the live show exactly knows why.
Yup, we know why. But I want to thank you all so much for supporting the show, and you guys have really come out and come out strong this time, and it's been a lot of fun being able to do these episodes. And last episode with Michelle Cho was a pretty good episode that we did on 5 centimeters per second. But today we get to talk about another anime film, and we're gonna be doing it with young Yoda himself. If you guys don't know who young Yoda is, if you didn't listen to the Ikiru episode, which I do recommend you guys go listen to because I enjoy that episode a lot. Brad is my partner in crime here at the Nerdcore Podcast Network. He is my right-hand man, and he is the stepfather of the network because the co-creator is Luis, but that's the absent father. This one's the actual stepfather who comes in to do the work when the father isn't around that much. Right?
I mean, I could have been the father, but I didn't show up till what, episode 3 or 4?
3. Yeah, good old Last Jedi trailer. But yeah, Brad's here. He chose this film. Mainly he chose it because he wanted to see me cry again. And yes, I did cry again.
I want to bring this up. This was not my first choice. Although I do love this movie. This was not my first choice to review. But someone had already decided to review the movie I had wanted to review.
He who has not appeared on the show yet. Very soon he'll be coming on. But yeah, Brad this was his safety episode because he wanted a movie that has already been claimed by somebody. And that was what happened. And usually not a lot of laughs happen on this episode, on these shows, but that does make me laugh because it reminds me of the situation with Leah, because Leah wanted to do Portrait of a Lady on Fire, but Alex claimed that from her. So she's getting Portrait of a Lady on Fire next season when Leah wanted to claim that one next.
I mean, this is one of those shows where if we actually lived in close proximity, there'd probably be violence.
Pretty much, yeah. If said person wasn't around you, it wasn't like miles away from you, he'd already probably gotten his ass kicked for stealing that movie from you.
We're stealing the movie that I wanted. But I am very happy to be here. I'm very happy to talk of Grave of the Fireflies because it is one of those anime/animated movies that I think deserves a watch from any and all people because it is a very different animated movie.
Yeah. Well, we've never actually discussed the filmmaker known as Isao Takahata, so I have to introduce him to you all. So without further ado, let's go ahead and introduce the filmmaker Isao Takahata. For those of you who do not know who Isao Takahata is, he is the co-founder of Studio Ghibli, who he founded it with, of course, the man, the myth, the legend, Hayao Miyazaki. And he was born in October 29th, 1935. And he died on April 5th, 2018. He primarily was a film director, but a screenwriter and producer, but he also worked a lot in television, as you can tell. He's mostly known for of course, his first film that he did with Studio Ghibli, Grave of the Fireflies, which we are discussing today. He also is known for Only Yesterday, Pompoko, and My Neighbor the Yamadas, and of course his Academy Award nominated film for the best animated film at the 87th Academy Awards, The Tale of Princess Kaguya. So, you know, Takahata is one of the main names that when you hear Studio Ghibli, you think about. You know, Mamoru Hosada, you know, worked for a bit with Studio Ghibli, but he never got to make like something there. But, you know, the next name that everybody would know, of course, that is Miyazaki's child, is Isao Takahata. And yeah, his films are very, you know, Ghibli-esque, because his films don't really have that Miyazaki, you know, animation style to it. They're a lot more, how can I say this, Brad? I want to say The Grave of Fireflies is a lot more old-looking compared to something like Kiki's something that would be made around this time. I can't remember.
If I can interject,
Totoro.
I mean, you can definitely tell Grave of the Fireflies, Jesus, has that Studio Ghibli kind of stylistic to it, but it does look old, and that could be because it's from 1988.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if you've watched any like The Tale of Princess Kaguya, you can tell that Takahata didn't stick with necessarily Miyazaki's style.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of went off and did his own thing. All his films are quite different in their art style.
Yeah.
Which, you know, that's pretty great to see, because when you think of Studio Ghibli, of course you think of Miyazaki, and of course you think of basically a painting on screen, and it's good to know that also that studio is producing, you know, something a bit different from that.
Yeah. His influence are ranging pretty far. You know, he does seem to have a very big appreciation for the French, you know, the French art. You know, he's very influenced by Paul Grimoire, French animator, but he is also very much influenced by the French New Wave director, you know, Jean-Luc Godard. And you know, he has all those really big French influences, like Frederic Bach in his works, Crack, and The Man Who Painted Trees. So Takahata would, you know, become one of those big names under Studio Ghibli, but he would also, you know, make a considerable a career before he was in Studio Ghibli. He had some pretty, you know, he had a stack of films that he had at least worked on before he became employed by Studio Ghibli. I mean, you have The Great Adventure of Horace, Prince of the Sun, which is his directorial debut. And you know, he did a little bit of short films with Miyazaki before they made it Studio Ghibli. You know, you had Johnny Kochi the Cellist, and you had all these different works. And his last film before he died that he worked on was The Red Turtle, which he was an artistic producer for that one. And there's a documentary on him which I have never seen and I do want to watch. It's Isao Takahata in The Tale of Princess Kaguya. It's probably one of those companion documentaries from the movie, but I would be interested to see it probably after I watch Princess Kaguya, because I've never seen that film.
That's actually a very beautiful film.
Very beautiful film. Yeah. Well, I was a really big fan of when we did Marnie Was There, and That's Ghibli as well. So, when people think about Ghibli, they really do think about just Miyazaki himself, Hayao Miyazaki. But, there's a lot of great directors that have worked inside of Studio Ghibli that aren't just Miyazaki.
Yeah. And this is just point proven. But also another one, Tales of Earthsea, is by Miyazaki's son, I believe.
Yeah. From Up on Poppy Hill is also Miyazaki's son, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so sooner or later, some people will end up choosing a Miyazaki movie here. And hopefully that will be sooner rather than later, because I would really like to talk about Miyazaki on here. But
I think the question comes up: which one do you choose, though? Especially one that you can get down into the detail and the nitty gritty of it.
yeah, well, one has already been pre-chosen. She just has not answered me on whether she wants to come in for season 1 or wait for season 2 on it. But yeah, that's all I'll say. Let me go ahead and introduce you guys to the film Grave of the Fireflies. Grave of the Fireflies was released, of course, in 1988. It's a Japanese animated war film, and we can't speak today, Brad. We can't.
I mean, it's a Sunday.
It's Sunday. It's late. We just did another podcast, so
my tongue is taking a day of rest.
Oh God. So it stars this. It's a story about this young boy and his sister, as they're basically navigating Japan through the Second World War, and their city gets bombed, and they have to go and live with their aunt, and I believe, if I remember correctly, because I've been having a really long day today, so I believe the mom died.
Yes.
Yes. And they're just trying to navigate that, and just the terrible thing that is warfare, and how it's been affecting the home front. And you see these kids resort to things as stealing, and them being diseased, and having to suffer from malnutrition. And this is very much a film that tugs at the heartstrings. But one of the main themes I always go to this film is basically the biggest phrase that everybody says: war is hell. War is 100% hell. And it's not just hell on the front lines. It's hell back home, where the people are staying at. And it's a what's it called? This film is a very big reminder of what happens in the home country that's at war.
Well, it's a very different film in the way that war is portrayed. Generally, you don't see just normal citizens. Usually, you're only shown soldiers at war.
Mm-hmm.
This goes back in and shows just normal everyday citizens and what they have to deal with the bombs falling around them. You usually don't get to see that in movies. So this is one of those. Its main focus, because we don't really see any fighting on the war front. You don't see any of that. You just see basically the citizens in Japan and how they're dealing with being firebombed.
Mm-hmm.
And this puts into context that even though we're American, we still can affect others, because that's just how war is.
Yeah. And this is based on a short story, and it's not semi-autobiographical short story written by I'm gonna say his name so wrong. Akiyuki Nosaka.
Akiyuki Nosaka.
Akiyuki Nosaka. And it's Akiyuki Nosaka had gotten so many offers for this film. Countless. And none of them struck him as the way that the offer was from Takahata. And Takahata felt so compelled to tell the story. And it really does kind of fit that very early Studio Ghibli, sense of anti-war sentiment. Even though Takahata really didn't plan for this to have such a anti-war sentiment to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This movie, even though it does have an anti-war sentiment, you can definitely tell that. I think it's mainly showing just the effects of war and the effects of Japan, and who kind of turns away from taking care of its people. That's really what this story is. You have a brother and his sister whose mother is lost, whose father is off fighting the war, and none of his family is taking care of him. The government isn't taking care of them. Society isn't taking care of them,
Mm-hmm.
and they perish because of it.
Yeah. And just the way that they're treated also by the citizens, what's it called? Seta is very much like looked down by the citizens of Japan. Like, oh, look at him, he's sleeping on the railroad, and what's it called, in the station, and without understanding that these people are going through the same thing, and it's like this helplessness of war is very universal with the people back in the country. Like, you have your soldiers who are fighting, but you never see films really concentrate on the citizens, especially young citizens.
Yeah, and I especially love how Seta is looked down upon because he doesn't have a job and he's not working, when in the very first of this movie you're told his manufacturing job that he was working at was bombed.
Yeah. So, it was just really tough. Like, how are you supposed to go back to work if your place was bombed, and that's the only work you had, and your boss is out of work too? How is he going to be able to recommend you to another job? It's just really hard, and everything's kind of stacked against Seta.
I mean, it's kind of how it's a funny parallel for what's going on right now.
Yeah,
is we're going through, and there's a lot of jobs that aren't going to be there in probably 3 months.
Yeah. Well, what's it called? And I wanted to first get into that whole, the anti-war sentiment, because, he doesn't really plan for this to be an anti-war film. And, I think a lot of the films that come from Ghibli aren't really intended to be anti-war. Even, like, some of them are very clear. Like Howl's Moving Castle, it is Miyazaki's response to the Iraq War. And My Neighbor Totoro, even though it's not supposed to have this like kind of anti-war thing, it kind of does have some sentiments in there about how war is evil. And, kids have to kind of go through post-war and, kind of give up their innocence. And in a sense, Takahata is doing the same, where these two children are kind of stripped of their innocence because of the war front.
Yeah, he really gets into it. This is... most animated films, I mean, Disney would never do this in my eyes. They would never show two children basically being orphaned and then dying of starvation. You would never see that in a Disney movie. I mean, I'm surprised to see it in a Studio Ghibli movie, to be honest. This is one of those movies that goes really in depth to the suffering that war causes. They even go into showing the mother all bandaged and bleeding through her bandages.
Yeah.
Because has third...
2, 3. Yeah, sorry. I had technical difficulties, aka my finger slip. But what were you saying, Brad?
I was just going into the detail about how the mother is even shown bandaged and then bleeding through those bandages from her 3rd-degree burns. Honestly, I don't see any other film really that depicts this basically horrific injuries and everything.
It is such a brutal film, especially for an animated film, because a lot of people don't really ever equate. A lot of people equate the style of animation with children, and having it being a child's genre. And not a lot of films ever go this like extra mile. And when you see that mom bandaged up with the blood coming out of it, it's like, God, this is such a brutal picture being painted for you. But then again, that is the brutality of war.
And then even going into the final scene of Setsuko, the sister, of her just hallucinating and thinking she's eating rice balls. And Seta is hurrying up and cooking because he managed to get food.
Yeah.
And he's cooking for her, and she just passes away.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't just stop there. It shows him basically cremating her and then putting her ashes in the little tin can of candy that he's been carrying around forever.
Yeah.
And it is this to me has to be, if it's not the saddest movie, it's up there in the top 5 easy.
I think
movies ever made.
I think it is the saddest movie ever made because it's a semi-autobiographical story, because it is a very, very personal story, And you look at Takahata, who was born in 35, so he had to be around like 6 or 7 when the war really broke out. So he was there to experience what it was being in a country that was at war. And in those experiences, like Miyazaki, kind of shaped what he would bring to his art.
Yeah, and with Nosaka's story, and this, when I first watched this, I didn't realize it was based on a true story.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize this till after I watched the film. And after you realize that, this story hits even more.
Yeah.
It's just a hard to swallow pill of this is what war is. You're going to have collateral damage. You're going to have, when you're basically bombing someone's home, you're going to have this.
Yeah.
Whatever side you're on. And that, that doesn't really get reflected in the history books. This doesn't get reflected in the history books of what happens to the other side. It's because, usually the winners are the one who gets in the book.
Yeah. And it is very refreshing to, to get something like this that really kind of does depict this very, very ugly part of our history. And it really shows kind of what was happening and in the countries that, we had this kind of blind look at, like, saying, okay, well, it's the enemy, but, not every citizen that was in the country was the enemy.
Not all of them were for the war. I mean, we've had many directors, Miyazaki included, and Kurosawa also.
Tarkovsky.
They didn't agree with Japan and the whole war, and that never really gets shown or told about. And this is kind of like a breath of fresh air in that, you watch this and it kind of makes you a little more empathetic towards people who are having to go with this constant fear of, I could die tomorrow, or even worse, I could lose everything and then starve to death tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really one of those, because when you talk about, you talk about how these Studio Ghibli films are really they're paintings in real life. This is the painting that you don't want to look at, but you kind of have to. It's the same way when we talked about Kurosawa, his brother taking him, showing him the debris of the earthquake and saying, this is it. This is what life is. That's kind of what Takahata is doing. It's like, here it is. This is what was happening in Japan during the Second World War, and this is what happened to an actual person. And instead of just the idea of going in, defeating the enemy, and coming out, this is what was actually happening at the time.
And I think what Takahata was trying to do is basically what you just said with Kurosawa's brother, when he, after the earthquake, brought Kurosawa and showed him all the dead bodies. There were thousands and thousands, and a burning city and everything. And that was, you face death. You have to face these horrors because they exist. Yeah. And that's what I think Takahata was doing. I don't necessarily think he was doing it for, say, the international audience. I really think he wanted to bring this to the forefront of the Japanese audience, because he was showing them that because of your disdain or your not caring attitude, you ended up killing more people after the war as well.
Yeah.
So, you can't just blame, the enemy for everything after if you don't do anything to fix what is going on with society. Yeah. And I think, I think all societies can take that from this film is, we need to have more empathy. We need to be more caring of, those who have it worse than us.
Yeah, because, war is kind of the product of, once we've kind of thrown out that all the empathy, and we've shown that, there really isn't a respect for life, because war is never the answer. War is really the last resort, because you are pretty much going and destroying civilian homes, and you're basically destroying a whole freaking country. And there's also something in here that I find so compelling. It's in the beginning of the film that I think that Takahata does an incredible job, because during wartime there is also the blind nationalism to that's happening. We saw it a lot in Vietnam, in the United States. Of course, things started to change differently when people were actually getting news about what was actually happening in Vietnam. But there's that when the first bombing happens, and everybody's getting back up and seeing the debris. One of the characters in there goes, "Thank God bless Thank you to the Emperor. Long live the Emperor." And you're like, what is going on here? Like, these people are, your city just got burned down, and the first thing that you wanna thank because you didn't die was the Emperor. And it kind of shows that blind nationalism that was being led at the time, where they, a lot of people were, the soldiers. It's the famous story, everybody knows the story. Like, it was better to had killed yourself in honor of the Emperor than having to be captured and killed by the enemy soldier.
And I mean, during this time, this Japan during this time, very nationalist. World War II was just proof that, and if you go back and look at the history from what I remember, the atomic bomb was dropped because, the United States did the math on it. They were like, we're going to be in this war for another 5 to 10 years, and Japan's not going to stop. Like, they will die for their emperor. They will not stop because they believe they can win because they have their emperor. And they decided to drop the 2 atomic bombs, even though they knew just the effect it would have. In a way, I don't think they knew the total effect. I hope not, anyway. But they did that to end the war sooner, because once the Japanese saw that and the emperor saw that, they realized, how can you fight that?
Yeah, and it comes down to how that nationalism that was brewing at that time. And, the people who were really willing to go out there and die for the emperor, who, even then, when we talked about this, we talked about, the fact that there's never been a film on the rape of Nanking. That this is the same emperor that ordered that, and that, you see these people kind of being blindly following this and thanking the emperor for their life being spared, and all while the people that are around them are starving, they're dying because they don't have enough money, and there's also shortages of food and resources.
I mean, and then just the scene where Seda is trying to steal the sugarcane for his sick sister, and he is just pummeled by the farmer that catches him. Now, granted, Seda had been stealing
for a couple of days.
For a couple days, maybe a couple weeks. So it had kind of gotten the territory where I could see the farmer being angry, but at the same time, this kid doesn't have anything. He doesn't have anyone. His dad's off fighting war. He's not getting a check. His mom's has passed away, and his aunt's a total asshole.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some characters that you just those characters. There's characters you just physically hate, even though they're not necessarily real. This aunt has to be one of the most evil beings, I think, to ever be put in a film.
And it's rather interesting, but we're gonna go ahead and talk about the character of the aunt and really what was going on at the time, and really the idea of honor as expressed in this film. But we've got to go ahead and get into a commercial break. But I did want to say something about what you brought up in regards to the way that the film is viewed as with different audiences, because it's interesting. Well, I was reading up, and a lot of people, in the Western, like you said, he didn't really make this for the Western audience. This was really for the Japanese to see what was happening when you lost the empathy for each other. And it said where in the article I was reading up that, and some people in Japan viewed him running from his aunt differently compared to the people in the Western hemisphere who viewed it as a dumb mistake. How, he should have just stayed there because it was the only place that they had to live instead of going to that shelter. And it's interesting because, once again, you bring up the fact that, Takahata really is making this for the Japanese people, not for the Western audience.
Yeah. And from my stance, there's 2 ways to look at this. To me, I don't think Setsuko could stay in that house unless he totally swallowed his pride. unless he basically became nothing in a way. That's how terrible this aunt was. There was no pleasing this woman. She was taking and taking anything he had. And then on top of that, I think what really broke his spirit was that she told Setsuko that her mother had died. She didn't even give him the chance to actually choose a time to sit his sister down and let her know that their mother had passed.
Yeah.
And I really think that's what caused the final straw.
Yeah. Well, we're going to go ahead and discuss what's left of that when we come back, but we're going to go into a small commercial break. So enjoy these ads made by some wonderful people on the rest of the Nerdcore Podcast Network, and we'll be back from the Cinema Condition with me and Brad as we discuss Grave of the Fireflies. We'll see you in a bit. Hey, I'm Raul Ayden Mendoza, and this is
Jabril Newton.
And we are the hosts of High Flyer Radio. And finally, pro wrestling has come back to the Nerdcore Podcast feed in the form of a show hosted by Jabril and I. And we talk about everything and anything in the pro wrestling world on Mondays at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Nothing's off limits. Whatever you guys want to talk about, if it's from AEW to SmackDown to Raw to NXT, nothing's off the table. We can talk about it.
We're going to talk all about it. And if you can get it a day early, you should go to the www.patreon.com/thenerdcore and pledge to the tiers on there so you can get this show and a lot of shows days early before anybody else gets to hear it. But enough talking about it. We'll go ahead and see you there at the Squared Circle. Oh, yeah. Don't tap out. Tune in.
Hey guys, this is Brad, aka Young Yoda. Raul said I had to make an ad, so that's what I'm doing. It's supposed to be for Unstructured, but as you guys know, you can freaking catch me everywhere when it comes to this podcast feed. You can find me on the Nerd Cores, on Gamer Cores, on Nerdy Chicanos sometimes when I get lost. But for this particular one, I want you guys to go check out Unstructured. The Raul gave me free reign to do whatever I want to do. I don't know what he was thinking. So go hear me talk about LeBron James and Taco Tuesday, vaping, so many other freaking weird topics that chimichangas, that's a good one. Shout out to Deadpool. And yeah, I guess this is the end of the ad. So if you guys want to find me, you can find me all over the place on this podcast feed. Anyways, thank you guys for listening. I love you all. And nerd up.
Hello, 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 guys and gals, and you're listening to The Ladies of Nerdcore. I am your host, Daniela Nunez, and along with my amazing co-host, Ashley Garcia, we discuss many things like social impact, pop culture, political realms, and any controversy surrounding the Nerdverse. Tune in and listen to us bi-weekly on the Nerdcore podcast feed, and we will love to chat and hear your thoughts on our wonderful show. And thank you again for listening to The Ladies of Nerdcore.
Hey everyone, my name is Raul, the Nerdy Chicano, and I am the host of The Impaired Files. The Impaired Files is an interview show brought to you every Thursday on the Nerdcore podcast feed. And I interview people such as filmmakers, content creators on YouTube, and podcasters like Colton Geschwander. And if you want to listen to that early, a whole week early, all you got to do is go to the Patreon and pledge to the $1 tier. And if you want to listen to it with the general public, then go to Nerdcore podcast feed on anchor.fm/the Nerdcore. And the case is closed, but it's not classified. See you guys there. Thank you for coming back with us. And we're here on the Cinema Condition with your host, Raul Ayden Mendoza. And we're talking Grave of the Fireflies with Young Yoda himself, Brad. And I just want to say, you guys got to go and make sure you listen to those shows. You know, all those shows are worked on by some really, really good people. And I'm not saying that because I host most of those shows. But, you know, a lot of people put a lot of work into those shows. So make sure you go listen to them and you go support that other feed, nerdcore.com. No, anchor.fm/nerdcore. Of course, our episodes premiere on there. But, you know, if you want to be on track and keep up to date with the episodes as they come out, you know, you want to be listening on this feed. But they're also on the other feed every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central Time. So go and listen to the other shows and go to anchor.fm/nerdcore for those other ones because they're made by some great people. So, yeah, we're back here, and I wanted to talk more about the aunt because, you know, it just the way that kind of the Santa is kind of being treated, especially during this time, especially during the time that we all should really have more empathy for each other. Like you know, and it's crazy how that sentence I just murmured right now it reflects into the state of the world we are. We see, essential workers being treated like shit right now during a pandemic. And, you see basically citizens who are starving being treated like shit here in this movie by the people themselves who are going through possibly the same thing that they are going to.
I mean, they literally are walking in the train station. They're walking by dead people.
Yeah.
They were like, and they literally kick them and call them bums.
Yeah.
That is the less than empathetic society of Japan that was apparently going on after the war.
Yeah. And so the aunt, yes, very 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 cold, very bitter, very terrible woman. And that I think I agree with you that the icing on the cake was when she breaks the news that the mom died, and they basically Seta has no input on how to break that to his sister, because that's a child. That's a child who doesn't really understand yet what's going on. When the place gets bombed and she's going, her and Seta are trying to go back. The first thing she complains about is that she lost her shoe. And
the scene where the aunt is taking the mother's kimonos.
Oh yeah,
and Setsuko is just crying, no, that's her mom's. She needs those. That just breaks your heart every time. Like every watch in this, I've seen this movie about 3 or 4 times. Every watch, it's that scene in particular where it just hurts.
Yeah, because that's the only thing that's left for them that they remember their mother by, and she's taking it away. She's taking it away from them. And it's just like, they have to worry about that, but they also have to worry about how they're going to live the next day because of the war. And they're obviously not wanted at that house. The aunt doesn't want them there.
No, the aunt only wants to sell anything they have and eat any food they have. I mean, it gets into a ridiculous kind of narrative in that she is using the rights that they brought over to make her family films. They're basically, she sees them as unwanted and unnecessary as she feeds them rice porridge, but feeds her family, actual food.
Yeah. And once again, it's kind of treating these people like scum, like if there's as if there's something wrong with them, but their whole freaking village just got burned down. Like they got bombed and they have no home to go back to.
And I mean, I might see the aunt's point if Seta was a 30-year-old man. I might be like, yeah, the dude needs to go try and find work somewhere. Like he can totally do that. But I think I forget what his age was, but I know it was at least 16 or under.
Oh yeah.
And so
chances would have been that he would have been drafted if he was not if he was above 16. He had to be like around 14, 15, or 13.
Exactly. So really, the job market is probably very slim, especially now. And I just find the aunt's character very ridiculous, very cold, very calculating in how she can get more and more out of Seta and Setsuko. And she even then guilt tripped them on she's offering them a room over the head, but at the same time, they're not wanted. They're absolutely not wanted.
And especially during the time that they find themselves in, you're going through a freaking war. Everybody's suffering. Everybody's starving. You're staying with somebody who obviously doesn't want you around. What's the point of staying? Like, it's better than just, kind of. And in a sense, this is where I get to the part about what was the difference between the Eastern and Western audiences. He wants to defend the honor of his mother and himself. And he really does say, well, if I'm not wanted here, if I'm not treated the way I should be treated as a human being, then maybe I don't have to be here. And I can take care of my sister myself. And yes, some people there would think like you should have just sucked it up and stay there because that was the best situation you had going for you right now. But you also put yourself in his shoes. He's a boy who has no job right now because his place got destroyed. His mother just died, and he didn't get to say the news to his sister the way he wanted to say it. And his aunt doesn't really want him around. Of course he wants to run away. Of course he doesn't want to be around that person. It's just not the way that a human being wants to be treated.
And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said you have to look at this from an Eastern perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and that society is different over there, where dignity is quite a they take that honor and that dignity very, very seriously,
Yeah.
to the point where they are willing to they are to kill themselves over it.
Yeah.
And whereas us on the Western side are going, once Setsuko got sick, I would have been begging my aunt to take us in.
Oh.
That's personally, from my, like, anything I can do to save her, I would be on my hands and knees asking for the aunt to take her back and nurse her back to health.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, that's just where we were born and where we were raised on, and how the view of the Western world. I would have taken her to my aunt, back to my aunt, tell her to what's it called, to help her as much as I can. I would have plummeted myself into debt with medical bills just for the fact that I need to save my little sister.
And some people say that might be a pride thing, but it's just a cultural difference.
Yeah.
It's just a different way in how we were brought up, how we were thinking, where we were brought up, pride comes before the fall, where that might not be the same over in Eastern cultures.
Yeah, and then once again, and then Takahata does the exact same. He kind of flips it up, and he says there's sometimes when pride, we don't need it, and that's when Seita kind of resorts to stealing, and he says, like, this is the only way I'm gonna be able to feed my sister and myself. I'm not getting paid. I don't have a job. I'm gonna have to resort to stealing, and
everything's been rationed by the government, so really nobody's receiving anything.
Yeah,
at this time,
and it sucks because that farmer, that's the food that he uses to feed his family and himself, and it sucks. But, like, at the same time, I don't think it was worth having to beat the kid up.
No, I think that just adds insult to injury. But I bring up cultural differences of, it's an honor thing. You stole from me, eye for an eye.
Yeah, and I can agree with that, but it's just it's those tough decisions that Seita has to do to make, where it's like.
And that might have been what Takahata was trying to get to the point of, that the culture needs to change if this is how we're treating our own citizens and we're letting children starve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's quite interesting because like we said, he doesn't really mean this to be anti-war, but this is very, very anti-war. It's kind of showing like what, because war in itself is the loss of empathy. And when these citizens really start to turn against each other, it is really the war effort really making its biggest success, is being able to pin its citizens against each other. And
it's a really complicated film, in that the anti-war sentiment is more towards its own country, and not towards the Americans. I mean, the Americans are causing, of course, we were causing.
Well, they're the ones who were bombing.
That we were the ones bombing, but he was speaking out, I think, more in the anti-war, on that Japan should never got into this. The nationalistic attitude led them to this, and these are the consequences, and this is a real reality that the citizens need to know, and we never need to do this again.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the Americans seem to be bringing the ammunition, lethal what's it called, the problem, but the Japanese government and the war front from themselves seem to be crushing the more fatal part. They're. I will take 100%. I will take dying from a gunshot or a bomb than having to die a slow, starving death.
Yes. After watching your sister die and your mother die, and hearing that your father has probably perished in the war, yeah, I'd rather take a bullet.
I 100%, and that's kind of showing like, well, even though both sides are evil, there are two sides that are evil in war, but who's suffering the most? Sure as hell ain't the people who are waging the war. It's the ones who are stuck at home, having to go through this and having to go through rations and stuff like that. Like I always go back to what's it called? You know, Muhammad Ali said, you know, what's it called? Ain't no what's it called? The Viet Cong ever called me the N word, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and what's it called? We're waging war with other people and destroying these places while we don't even think about the citizens, and that's how it is in this film. It's like nobody's really thinking about the citizens. They're kind of like, well, I just hope the emperor gets to lead us to the victory, and we hope we get to pass this because, you know, we need to win this war. But nobody's seeing the fact that your own citizens are being starved to death and they're dying.
Yeah, it's a sad reality in that the ones who make the decisions are usually blind to what happens when they make those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Especially to those in lower economic status.
Yeah, and especially children, man, because you know there's a very big aspect when you kind of talk about children, you know, especially war films, because children are the most innocent people. You know, they're you know, if you go to the theological sense, you know, they're the ones who are rid of sin. You know, they're the ones who have not done anything wrong yet. And in this film, you're seeing them being the ones that suffer the most. You know, you have a little girl like who, and you're like, wow, like, you know, this whole war has really stripped them of that innocence and really made them kind of lose that.
I really do think that Takahata was showing that Saita, in all he could do, was trying to protect Setsuko from that reality of what was going on, and wanted to keep her as a child. But in the end, even he couldn't save her from that.
Yeah. And that's, what's it called? That always reminds me of 1997's La Vita è Bella, Life is Beautiful from Roberto Benigni. Of course, the ending is very different in that movie compared to this one. But you know, it's crazy because like even in these war times, we're kind of resorted back to our normal human condition, which is to make sure that those around us aren't suffering the same way that we are, to help them, to make sure that you know that they don't fall into the pits of what is going on around us. So it's as simple as a father making this out to be like in Life is Beautiful, a father who's in the concentration camps with his son, making it out to be a game, so that way he doesn't have to think about about what's going on. Or in this film with Seita is basically trying to keep Setsuko calm, and you know, taking her to live in that shelter that she really enjoyed being in, and trying to make it as like, you know, trying to take her mind off of what's actually happening.
Yeah, it's definitely a very beautiful and poetic film at that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it is one of the saddest films I think
I've
ever watched.
Yeah, it's so like I've watched, and you know, we have that ongoing joke that all I watch is depressing stuff. I can't watch this movie more than once a year. I can't.
It's difficult. It's very. I mean, I could probably watch it more than once a year just because of how fantastic it is, but I don't want to. It is just very. It is a very. You know, there's some movies that you really want to rewatch because, you know, you really like I would say maybe a Solo. Like that's a movie like it really gets you going. This is a slog. This is a hit after hit after hit. You're basically bloody and bruised by the end of this movie on a mental kind of state.
Yeah, dude, you're basically being punched repeatedly by this film, and you're being like, now you're trying to get up, and then comes in again. It never stops. Kind of like
it never ends until the end, and I mean, even the end is just like a gut punch of because it goes into one of those cyclical, like I just watched Loon Davis. It was kind of like that, but it you know how it ends from the very beginning. It tells you how it ends, like it literally shows you how this movie is going to end, and then it goes into how you got to that point, and it's just and you, even though you already know how it ends from the very beginning, the ending, it just haunts you.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the last things I wanted to talk about was, because it is pretty much at the core of what this film is. It is what Takahata has really, talked about the most. It's really the conformity, especially in children, having to fall in line with what is going on and being told, like, this is the way it is and we have to kind of go through this instead of having to, find a way out of it. And, you're kind of just waiting for the day that the war actually ends, and it doesn't, or you just have to die off. And, once again, Saita kind of tries to work around that by trying to keep the spirits of Setsuko higher, but he's the one who's constantly having to be put on the in line. He has to find a job. He has to be providing for his sister. He has to take care of her because there's nobody else left to really do that for him.
Yeah, it's a hard one. Saita, I mean, that's really what it comes down to. This film is just so difficult to watch.
It is very difficult.
And Saita as a character, as the main protagonist is I guess that's right.
Yeah, the protagonist.
He takes all of the slings and the arrows, and unfortunately, it doesn't end well for him.
No. And at the end, we do get, finally, but now, Brad, I don't know if you see that ending as a happy ending or a sad ending, because I think to me it's a little bit of both. It is sad that they had to die.
Yeah.
But I also find
but it's happy in that
they don't have to suffer anymore.
The suffering ended. Suffering ended, and they're together.
They're together. They're hand in hand. It's brother and sister. The suffering has ended, and according to whichever creator you believe in, they are going to join their mother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and father. More than likely.
Yeah, more than likely. Yeah,
because I guarantee to me, I really hope the father didn't survive, because if he came back and figured out that all his family had died.
Yeah.
His wife and his 2 kids. If I was that dad and my aunt and my sister threw them out, basically, I probably wouldn't have a sister.
So I won't have a sister anymore, bro. You excommunicated and everything.
Might be going to prison.
Might be going to prison, yeah. Yeah. And I 100% agree, Brad. Yeah, and I mean, you really think about it, like, I really do hope too the dad died. And I hope that doesn't sound evil, but I do not want to be the soldier coming back from grueling years of war after their country basically collapsed, and they're not allowed to have a military again, to find out that all that fighting, that blind fighting that he had to do for an emperor who did not care whether they lived or died, and their family's gone. All of them are dead. And the only person who's alive close to him, possibly, is the one person who basically treated them the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just that existence, it sounds horrible.
Yeah. I also got to give props. There's a lot of stuff that we never really get to talk about the technical aspects here, but I do got to give a props here, because usually this, like I said, this is not a review show. We don't have to talk about those things, and
we've already reviewed this anyway.
We reviewed this, yeah. But the sound design is always so impeccable. I mean, the sound of those planes, the bombs coming down, and the noises of that, and then the sound of the fire and stuff, like it's incredible. Like, Ghibli really does know how to up the ante with that stuff.
When it comes to sound and music scores, Ghibli, it's really hard to find something Ghibli didn't get it right. Like, their scores, like the music they use, they know exactly what to use at what time during what scene to get your waterworks going.
Yeah. And it's 100% agree with you there, because the music just keeps amplifying it, and it's what kind of tugs at the heartstrings and keeps having you come back to to be like, oh shit, why am I randomly crying right now? Oh well, of course the music is like right there. It's like how I always describe Cinema Paradiso's score. It's like the minute you hear that first note, you're like, oh shit, here we go, I'm crying. Damn it. But yeah, dude, this is a film that I really do recommend everybody watch this one because I think it's an important movie to watch.
It's definitely important in the whole. We bring this up like the two pillars I really think for anime movies, one being Akira, and two being Grave of the Fireflies.
Yeah,
I think those are really pillars because on one aspect you have a very bright movie. I mean, it's sci-fi. It's very bright though. It's very neon. It's very futuristic. And then you come back to Grave of the Fireflies, and it's more towards the dark, the depressing. And these were made, very early on, and they're foundational anime movies.
And you really do kind of see that where anime really does hit the cinematic style. Like this goes toe to toe with all of the war movies we've seen.
Oh yeah,
live action. If I had to pick if I was seeing this going around Twitter, where like if you had the chance to make a what's it called, a double feature at a theater for yourself and for the people coming, if I had to do a war one, I would pick this one and what's it called, Ivan's Childhood.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because you just want to make them cry, right?
Yeah, make them cry. Or do this one and Apocalypse Now.
I mean, this really, and here's another thing. This and anime in general, I think disproves that theory that cartoons, can't cause feelings.
Yeah.
Because those people. You've heard it from those people of, Countless. It's a cartoon. It's just a cartoon. This is not just a cartoon. This is a full-fledged movie.
Yeah.
This tugs at your heartstrings just as much as any scene in Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, 100%. This goes toe to toe with any live action film I've probably ever seen. This really does it does what cinema really kind of goes out to do. It's the reason why I created a show like this. It is to talk about the movies that have something deeper talking into it. This captivates you just like any film I've ever seen that's live action. This is structured just as great as any film I've seen in live action. It's scored just as great as a movie that I've seen in live action. It goes toe to toe with any film, to me.
Easily. I think anyone who just puts this down because it's a cartoon has never watched it.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those, and we've said this before with some movies of, I just couldn't connect to those characters.
Yeah.
I mean, live action, they have difficulty doing that in a lot of movies.
Mm-hmm.
This movie, you connect right to the characters. You connect and you just feel that pain. I don't have any siblings, but it's still, with this movie, you still know what it's like to have a sibling, to lose. It's that feeling of loss and that feeling of a life you can't control. And that's out of your hands, pretty much.
Yep. And what a great segue as we finish up our conversation on Grave of the Fireflies, and a great tease, because the next movie that Brad is doing is when we come back, is The Farewell from Lulu Wang, and it's a film that does talk about loss and what we do when we really can't control the outcome that is coming, the inevitable outcome. So, Brad, I want to thank you so much for coming on, man. We did it. Another episode in the books for Cinema Condition. You got your second appearance in. Of course, you've already claimed your film. You claimed Stalker. God, I can't wait for that.
That's going to be a good review. That is an amazing movie by a director I wish I had gotten into way earlier.
Yeah. Talk about a director you wish you could, they were like, what creative would you have a conversation with, dead or alive? I want to sit down with Tarkovsky. I want to sit down with Tarkovsky with a what's it called, with a shot glass of vodka in our hands, and I just want to find out why this man is just so depressed.
I mean, because Russia.
Yeah.
I mean, I would honestly sit down with Kurosawa, but that's on a whole different kind of point.
For sure. But
yeah, and just be like, how the frick did you do that in the 40s with the equipment you had?
natural.
How did you do that shot?
Yeah, pretty much, man. So I want to thank you so much as always, man. Where can they find you?
They can find me at Random Germ 101 everywhere on Twitter, Instagram. You can follow me at This Is Local Love, Tilbrand.com. You can find me pretty much every day. I know I missed a day yesterday. I know this is coming out later, but whatever. For the live show, but you can find me having fun on the live show pretty much every week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I will be co-host with his role for Raul as long as I'm able to, or as long as he wants me to.
There's nobody right now who can take your job, so don't worry. You got it intact, even though I joke constantly.
After how many episodes have we done together? 500 plus, easy.
Yeah.
I want to say, I don't think anybody, I wouldn't want to be co-host for anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I really hope you wouldn't want another co-host unless I just fucking died one day.
I don't know, man. I mean, if like, you know, if the next guest wants to say like, hey, can I be the co-host of the show? Nah, I'm fucking with you, bro. No, I would not sell you out like that. I would not sell you out like that. I don't want. I love doing this show with you.
Although I do know the next host that's coming up, I won't mention his name, but I could see where the wheels could be turning there. But to be honest, though, like, I don't think anybody's going to come on with you like day after day after day after day.
Nah. You're the only one who's willing to sacrifice an hour to 2 hours of his day to come on with me. And that's why you're never going to get replaced. Even though I like to joke around that you'll be fired, but you're not. So
I mean, it's entertainment.
Yep. So we've reached the end. And as always, you can help us out by going to our Apple Podcast or our Stitcher feed, leaving a 5-star review and helping us out there. But moment of truth is here, my friends. As always, I will let you guys know who's our next guest. And next week on the Cinema Condition, we will be discussing Spike Lee's School Days with none other than host of the Mean Up podcast, part of the First Cut YouTube channel, Robert Butler III. RB3 will be coming on with us to talk about that film, and I'm very, very excited. I got the chance to interview RB3 on the Impaired Files, and it was one of my favorite episodes. It was a complete honor to talk with him. And he's not the only person from First Cut coming to make an appearance, but that will get discussed on a later episode. But I'm very, very excited for RB3 to be coming on the show, and I can't wait. I can't wait to talk about School Days with him. And I can't wait to talk about Spike Lee. You guys probably thought Spike Lee was coming on, right? Imagine if that was possible, Brad. Oh.
Give us another 7 years.
Yeah. Or if somebody is listening to this show and Spike Lee's like your uncle or something, you know, kind of nudge him our way.
I really think we keep up with this role. You will be interviewing Spike Lee.
Only would hope so, my friend. Only would hope so. But without a further ado, you know you can find everything that is to do with the Nerdcore Podcast Network on thenerdcore.com. Please go check that out. As always, you can find me at the Nerdy Chicano on both Instagram and Twitter. And as always, my friends, I have finally found a way to send you off with this show. And it's the only way I know how to. The Cinema Condition was brought by the fact that cinema is a commentary on the human condition. So the best way to learn it is to watch films. It is to study them. It is to analyze them. And remember, my friends, good films are worth living for. So, my friends, I will see you on the next one. But it has been the Nerd Chicano. And next week, we'll see each other when we discuss School Days. See you guys.